Dr. Otavio Cardoso, how is your work going? A handsome man, wearing a white lab coat, looked up from his desk. His eyes focused on the police officer who had just entered his office. He took a sip of his coffee. This is Julio, a close friend. What's going on, Julio? Why are you so formal today? The dead can't hear us, so we can talk normally, he said with a smile, finding an empty chair to sit in. He looked at Otavio and noticed something that bothered him. How can you eat here? Julio asked, grimacing in disgust. Otavio shrugged. What's the problem? Where else should I eat? This is my office. Want some coffee? Julio looked like he might get sick and quickly shook his head. No thanks, I'm fine. Otavio reached for a stack of papers on his desk and handed them to him. Here's the report you wanted. Julio quickly flipped through the papers and then relaxed with a smile. Thanks, it's exactly what I thought. Now I don't need to rush, and we can chat. How are things with you? Otavio Logued. You never cease to amaze me. I can't imagine how you would talk to me if the report wasn't ready. I'm doing well, and before you ask, yes, I'm still single. How is that possible? I remember at the last party, you left with the most beautiful woman there. I don't know, Julio, it seems like girls don't want to be with someone who has my kind of job. As soon as they find out I work with dead people, they lose interest. Well, that's your fault, isn't it? You could have followed in your family's footsteps and played the violin. But instead, you chose a strange job dealing with the dead, Julio teased. Otavio Logued. Imagine that on stage, wearing an elegant suit, playing for a large audience. But no. I love my job as a medical examiner, investigating the causes of people's deaths, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Growing up, Otavio's family always assumed he would become a musician like the rest of them. Music was in their blood, and young Otavio was expected to follow the same path. His days were packed from morning till night. After regular school, he rushed to music lessons and then to a private tutor. If someone had woken him up in the middle of the night and asked what he hated most, he would have instantly answered, music. But he never said that to his mother, father, or grandmother. They would have been shocked. Instead, Otavio quietly nurtured a love for investigations and detective series. In school, he excelled in subjects that had nothing to do with music, like math and biology. His parents didn't notice, or didn't want to see, their son's true passion until something happened that changed everything. When Otavio was in 8th grade, already burdened with countless music trophies, a new girl joined his class. Even years later, he remembered how his heart skipped a beat and then started beating again, but in a completely new way. She was beautiful, almost like an angel, and Otavio felt like he didn't stand a chance with her. He was skinny, pale, and always seemed to be carrying a mythical instrument, the embodiment of self. But Otavio wasn't someone who gave up easily. He spent a week observing the girl, learning about her, and finally mustered the courage to talk to her. Hi Otavio, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The girl looked at him with great surprise. Hi. Can I walk you home? Otavio asked. The girl laughed and looked Otavio up and down before responding. You know, if a strong wind comes, it might blow you away, and I'd be responsible. And if someone tries to attack us, I'd have to save you. The people around them burst into laughter, and Otavio felt his face turn red. He ran home with tears in his eyes, where his grandmother was waiting. What happened? Why aren't you at music school? And why do you look so messy? His grandmother asked. Otavio's anger overflowed. He grabbed his violin and threw it across the room. Because I hate music school. I hate music and I'm not going to study it anymore. His voice choked, looking like he might faint. Otavio ran to his room, slamming the door behind him. From that day on, everything changed. Otavio refused to practice music again. His grandmother had to take medication to calm her nerves, his mother sobbed, and his father stayed silent, understanding his son's feelings. He knew what Otavio was going through because he had felt the same way when he was young. Even now, he would rather be fishing with his friends or enjoying a beer than dealing with all the trauma. Eventually, after visits to a psychologist and many family discussions, Otavio earned the right to choose his own path in life. He joined the swim team and focused on school subjects that fascinated him, like science and math. He even started doing his own experiments in his room, living a completely different life than before. Cried again, his grandmother scolded, but Otavio didn't care, even when he came home with bruises on his nose and bleeding. Music was now something from the past. When it was time to choose a college, his family gently suggested something related to the arts, but Otavio announced that he wanted to pursue medicine. His grandmother's mouth dropped open, and now it was his mother's turn to take pills to calm down. Sadly, Otavio didn't pass the physical exam for the police academy, but he had a backup plan. He enrolled in the medical school that interested him so much. It seemed that the women in his family finally breathed a sigh of relief, although they still didn't fully understand his decision. "A doctor is a very loving and safe job," Otavio's family said with relief. But their relief disappeared when they learned about the specific field Otavio had chosen. He would be a medical examiner, someone who investigates the cause of unexpected or violent deaths. This was very different from playing the violin, but for Otavio, investigating the mysteries of death was an art in itself. He had found his true passion, a calling that resonated deeply in his soul. It had taken a painful realization and a twist of fate to guide him there. But now that he had found this path, he embraced it. It was something unconventional, but it was his. "You're lucky," Julio said with a touch of envy, sitting there in his kingdom as the ruler of the underworld. "And nobody bothers you." But only a loud sound broke the silence in the office where they were sitting. "I saw you curse someone," Otavio teased, a touch of amusement in his voice. Julio quickly stood up and said goodbye. He hurried out of the room, his face showing concern. Otavio climbed the stairs where an ambulance and a police car were parked. The stretcher was being removed from the ambulance with a body on it. The paramedic approached Otavio and said, "Mr. Cardoso, we need to find out why this young woman died. She is about 20 to 25 years old. I don't see any cuts or bruises, but she died suddenly under very strange circumstances." Otavio looked at him and replied, his face calm and professional. Great. I'll leave everything to you." The stretcher was taken to the department. The paramedic left, and Otavio pulled the sheet back to reveal the body. Most of the time, the faces of the deceased looked normal, but the touch of death always left a mark. "Not here." The skin was pale, and the limbs were cold, but otherwise, the young woman looked like she had just fallen asleep. Otavio normally didn't spend much time looking at the faces of the dead, but this girl was different. Her features were surprisingly beautiful, almost perfect. Something inside Otavio's chest ached. He had a strange feeling of longing as if he knew and loved her. "She is so young and beautiful. If only she were alive, I could have found the courage to ask," he thought. His mind wandered, imagining how she would react if she knew he worked with the dead, but he quickly pushed that thought away and prepared to do his job. Otavio looked at the girl on the table and felt a wave of courage unlike anything he had ever felt before. It was as if he wanted to protect someone dear, someone like the young woman lying there. Her serene and gentle face made his heart ache. How could someone so beautiful have to die? She deserved to live. Her beauty was like a work of art. Otavio snapped out of his thoughts and prepared for the autopsy. He picked up the scalpel, feeling the cold handle in his hand. The body on the table no longer seemed like a person, but a puzzle to be solved. Otavio was used to digging deep to find the truth, even if it was hidden. That's what his job required. He made a small incision, just an inch long, and then recoiled. The girl's skin seemed to tremble. He leaned closer, his lips near hers, but he didn't feel any breath. Am I imagining things? He wondered, confusion in his mind. He picked up the stethoscope and passed it over the body, listening carefully, but heard nothing. Oh, what the hell was that? Am I dreaming? He questioned himself, confusion etched on his face. He was about to pick up the scalpel again when the body on the table twitched. The girl had been declared dead, and now she was moving. She opened her eyes, her sky-blue gaze wandering around the room in shock before landing on Otavio, who stood there, his face as pale as a sheet. I'm cold, she whispered, her voice weak, lips barely moving, before falling back onto the table. Otavio's heart raced as he ran to the phone, dialing a colleague in the emergency department. Hi, I need your help. We have a girl who was dead but just came back to life. Hurry, calm down. The voice on the other end was filled with disbelief. Otavio quickly explained the situation and hung up, his hands trembling as he turned back to the girl on the table. Her eyes were closed again, and her breathing was shallow. A few hours earlier, Amanda was working as a cleaner in a private and luxurious residence. Hey Anna, can you finish up here on your own? There's just a little left. I'm going to help the girls wash the windows, Amanda replied to her senior colleague, a plump woman, without stopping her work. Yes, dear. Go ahead. Don't worry, just take out these trash bags, okay? Amanda picked up the bags and carried them to the backyard, where others in the same uniform were visibly tending to the grand property of one of the wealthiest individuals in the city. They were tidying the yard, cleaning the garden, and keeping everything in perfect order. Amanda had been working at the cleaning company for a year, but still didn't know all her colleagues. Usually, she only worked with a few of them. However, this particular job was different. The client was preparing for an important event and needed his large house spotless as quickly as possible. Many workers were called in to ensure the job was done promptly. Walking down a narrow path behind the house, Amanda turned a corner of an annex. It's a bit gloomy here, nothing like the front of the house, as she nervously said to herself, trying to shake off a feeling of unease as she approached the trash bin. A sudden chill ran down her spine. At that exact moment, her phone buzzed with a message, and she glanced at the screen. Her eyes caught the movement of another worker. His upper body, hidden behind a stack of boxes, was approaching, only his hands were visible holding the heavy load. Amanda tried to step aside to let him pass, but it was too late. He bumped into the boxes, which scattered, and she felt a sharp, painful blow to her head. What was that? It was all she could utter before the world went dark. Her body went limp, her breathing became shallow, and all she could hear was the faint whisper of footsteps moving away. Help, please. I'm feeling sick, as she groaned, struggling to find the wall for support. She took a few steps before collapsing to the ground, losing consciousness with no further memory. Did you see the attacker's face or remember any distinctive features? One of the interrogators asked, leaning in with intense interest. Sorry, no. I didn't see the face, just the hands. But there seemed to be a black bracelet on one of the wrists. I can't remember exactly, Amanda replied, her voice trembling. Otavio and Julio exchanged significant glances. That's very important information. Well done. If you remember anything else, let us know. Rest for now. The council tried to reassure her. They decided to keep Amanda's survival a secret to avoid alarming the attacker. They needed more time to investigate. The next morning, Amanda finally felt stronger. Otavio visited her again, patiently explaining the circumstances of the encounter. The girl was scared and overwhelmed, still trying to grasp the terrible incident that had happened. Tears filled her eyes as Otavio's gentle grandmother comforted her with reassurance and compassion. Your relatives must be really worried, Otavio said gently. Julio told me that 2 women came to see him. One of them said she was your grandmother and the other seemed to be your aunt, Otavio asked gently. I don't have parents, they died a long time ago, Amanda replied in an emotionless voice. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to. Otavio stammered, mentally reprimanding himself for his lack of tact. It's okay, it was a long time ago, as she replied, her eyes distant. Then she asked, so my grandmother came, right? Yes, but we also didn't tell her much to prevent the information from spreading. Otavio looked at the fragile girl and felt a strong desire to protect her. I won't pressure you about anything else, not until you want to talk about it on your own. Here's the thing, Amanda. You can't go home now, and I feel a sort of responsibility for you. Please don't take it the wrong way, but it would be better if you stayed with me for a while, until Julio finds the culprit, and he certainly will. He's the best at what he does. Amanda looked silently to the side. Otavio waited. Finally, she gave a slight nod. Thank you. Days later, the girl was discharged. Otavio took her to his home, gave her an extra set of keys, insisted she call if she needed anything or simply wanted to talk, and then he returned to work. The day seemed to drag on forever. Julio provided no updates, unable to wait any longer for news. Otavio, cautious, returned home at night. He carefully opened the door, entered the hallway, and suddenly stopped. He took a deep breath. The apartment was filled with the delicious aroma of freshly cooked food. He smiled broadly, thinking, who knew? I never believed my kitchen would see the day when something so delicious was cooked in it. Good evening, Amanda greeted simply. The guest and the host sat down for a warm meal. Otavio devoured the food with pleasure. Amanda, a little shy, smiled contentedly. I wanted to thank you for taking me in. It's nothing special, just pasta with vegetables. I've never tasted anything better. Thank you, Otavio said, smiling back. During the meal, the two talked and learned more about each other. When the conversation turned to hobbies, Amanda mentioned her love for music. You play the violin? Otavio exclaimed, with a sparkle of curiosity in his eyes. Yes, is something wrong? Isn't everything okay? Amanda asked, pausing mid-air. Otavio smiled, his eyes lighting up as he ruffled his hair. It's just that. How can I say? I used to play the violin too, but unlike you, I found my calling elsewhere. Oh wow, I can't imagine you with a violin bow in your hand, Amanda said, her eyes shining with curiosity. Both laughed, enjoying the moment. Why did you stop playing? She asked, leaning in to hear his story. Otavio's face softened as he recounted his journey as a frustrated musician. He described how he used to be passionate about the violin, practicing for hours and even performing in small venues, but over time he realized that his heart was in medicine and chose a different path. At the end of his story, he laughed and said, the women in my family still can't accept my choice. Amanda smiled thoughtfully, her mind wandering to her own family. She was silent for a while, and then suddenly, her words poured out like a torrent, tinged with warmth and sadness. Amanda grew up without a father, who died before she was born. Her mother worked tirelessly, sacrificing herself to create a loving and comfortable environment for her daughter. On a special day in her childhood, her mother took her to the conservatory for a classical music concert. The experience was magical and left an indelible mark on her heart. From that moment, the girl dreamed of playing a musical instrument. Her mother recognized and fully encouraged her love and ambition. Amanda had a natural gift for music and diligently honed her violin skills. By the age of 16, she was already a talented violinist, playing with grace and emotion. Then tragedy struck. Her mother was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and doctors gave her only 6 months to live. The devastating news shattered their world. You need to find your grandmother. You must have family to lean on when I'm gone, her mother pleaded during one of their heartfelt conversations, her voice full of urgency. Mom, don't talk like that. You will get better, everything will be fine. Besides, our father's family disowned us. You said Grandma cut all ties with them. We need to face them against her will. She was against you from the start, Amanda replied through tears, her voice trembling with emotion. Don't argue, there's no time. Do you think it will be easy alone? They are still your only family, her mother whispered, her eyes pleading, laden with the weight of her words. Amanda shook her head, hugging her pale and fragile mother. Promise me you will contact them, her mother insisted, her voice barely audible. I promise, Amanda whispered, as her mother's condition worsened. Amanda gathered the courage to swallow her pride and went to her grandmother, Alice. Alice was a strong and successful woman who lived in a large house and ran her own real estate business. The reunion was awkward at first, but gradually bridges were rebuilt, and Amanda found solace in reconnecting with a part of her family she never knew. Alice's eyes widened when she saw Amanda, so impressed with her resemblance to her late son that she recognized her immediately as her granddaughter. The family connection was unmistakable, and the emotions it stirred were deep. Please help save my mother, Amanda begged, tears in her eyes. I don't need anything else from you. Alice's heart was moved by the girl, and she agreed to help. However, despite all efforts, the day came when Amanda's mother passed away quietly. The girl's grief knew no bounds, it was so deep it seemed endless. But her mother's words echoed in her ears, encouraging her to pull herself together and move forward. Her relationship with her newly discovered grandmother was awkward at first, full of uncertainties and unspoken feelings. When Alice offered for Amanda to move in with her, Amanda hesitated but remembered her mother's wise words that they were the only relatives left. Moreover, as she got to know her grandmother better, Amanda realized that Alice was not as bad a person as she had been portrayed. Amanda moved into her grandmother's house, and over time, the two gradually began to bond. Alice saw how decent, educated, kind, and pure-hearted Amanda was. Her impressive violin skills only deepened Alice's admiration. The pair were on their way to forming a deep bond, finding comfort and understanding in each other that they did not expect to discover. But not everything was smooth in this newly discovered family connection. Amanda's grandmother, living with her cousin Fernanda, who had appeared after her divorce, managed the household and enjoyed the elderly woman's full trust in family matters. Fernanda was accustomed to being the center of attention and having control, but now, to say the least, she was not happy that Alice's direct heir Amanda had joined the family. From the first meeting, Fernanda immediately took a dislike to her. Fernanda's sighs were often filled with suspicion and jealousy, watching Amanda's every move. Her attitude created tension in the house, a sharp contrast to the warmth that was growing between Amanda and Alice. Despite the scrutiny, Amanda did her best to be polite and respectful to Fernanda, understanding that she was part of her grandmother's life. However, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off with her aunt. The family dynamics were complex, full of love, connection, and tensions, representing a new chapter in Amanda's life, one that brought promises but also challenges. The experience of living with her grandmother was a mix of joy and adaptation, and Fernanda's presence added an unpredictable element to their daily lives. That girl is a scammer, she appeared out of nowhere aiming to take the old lady's money. My naive sister believes her, she must be completely delusional, Fernanda said privately, her face twisted with anger and suspicion. She constantly harassed Amanda and tried to turn Alice, the head of the house, against her. Fernanda made life at home unbearable, always finding faults in Amanda and skillfully pretending when confronted by Alice. Her tactics were subtle but relentless, reaching a point where Amanda stayed late at school or in her violin lessons just to avoid interacting with Fernanda. Despite the hostile environment, Amanda never complained to her grandmother. She believed the older woman wouldn't believe her. Additionally, she didn't want to cause any suffering or distress. She faced Fernanda's bitterness silently, her heart aching with the injustice of it all. Finally, unable to endure the scrutiny any longer, Amanda moved out as soon as she was accepted into college. She needed space to breathe and to get away from Fernanda's constant scrutiny and criticism. After that, about 5 years passed during which she lived an independent life, having successfully completed music school. She played part-time in an orchestra and did other part-time jobs, like cleaning services, to support herself. Fernanda stopped tormenting her when she realized Amanda had no claims on her grandmother's money. She seemed to lose interest in the young woman as soon as the threat to her inheritance disappeared. However, her grandmother Alice still missed Amanda terribly. She hoped her granddaughter would return to live with her. Alice called periodically, their conversations filled with affection and love, but also with a touch of sadness. Do you know what I just remembered, dear?" he exclaimed suddenly, finishing his story. His eyes widened with realization. What, Otavio? She asked, her interest piqued. The day before I was attacked, I received a message from Grandma. She invited me to her house on her birthday and said she wanted to tell me something important. By the way, have they found my phone yet? Amanda asked, a worried expression on her face. Unfortunately, not yet, Otavio replied, frowning as he considered the implications of her words. A new thread of mystery was being woven into their conversation, adding to the complex tapestry of events: Amanda's connection with her family, the unexpected message from her grandmother, and the strange attack. They were all pieces of a puzzle that seemed to become more intricate the more they explored. Amanda's eyes suddenly widened, and she sat up straight, as if shaken by a memory. I also remembered something else," she murmured. What?" Otavio asked, leaning forward in his chair, his eyes fixed intently on her. Yes, absolutely. I couldn't remember before, but now it's clear," Amanda confirmed, nodding emphatically. Otavio's heart started to beat faster. This was a crucial piece of information. He quickly picked up his phone and dialed his friend Julio's number. Julio, come to my house quickly. I have something for you." Julio arrived within half an hour with a worried expression. He listened to Amanda attentively, asking clarifying questions and making sure to capture all the details. When they were alone, Otavio dared to share his own thoughts on the matter. Do you think the gang is involved in this?" he asked, his voice low and thoughtful. Rule out any possibility. Anything can happen, especially since Amanda says she has no enemies, well, except for her aunt, Otavio replied, rubbing his chin. Otavio pondered for a moment, lost in thought. How can such a good person have enemies? Julio gave his friend a teasing look, his eyes shining with mischief. Is that how you see her?" stammered Otavio, his face flushing slightly. Okay, but why not? She's beautiful, sweet, plays the violin. Don't miss your chance, or someone else will quickly snatch her away from you, teased Julio, laughing at his friend's discomfort. Stop talking nonsense. She's level-headed, Otavio interjected, trying to steer back to the main point. You better tell me what's going on with the case. Any progress? Julio's smile faded, and he grew serious. His demeanor shifted as he focused on the case. Well, where do I start? It turns out the surveillance camera footage from the scene of the incident captured someone in uniform carrying boxes. Unfortunately, the recording quality was poor, and we couldn't get a clear image of the face. Moreover, on that specific day, the cleaning company had hired some temporary workers due to staff shortages. This made identification even more challenging, as the regular employees didn't recognize each other. Julio described the complexities of the investigation as they meticulously worked to narrow down the list of suspects and make sense of the evidence they had. The description of the tattoo could be a crucial lead, something that could help identify the assailant. Julio paid a visit to Amanda's grandmother's house. After talking to her, he was about to leave when the car pulled up and Fernanda appeared, her face flushed with emotion. Hey, Aunt Alice, what's the police doing here?" Fernanda asked, curiosity and concern mixed in her tone. Is it Amanda, is she gone? Alice cried, her voice breaking and tears welling up in her eyes. Upon hearing the anguish in Alice's voice, Fernanda quickly rushed over and gave her aunt a comforting hug. A moment later she pulled away and asked, her voice filled with dread, "Oh my God, what happened to her?" "I don't know. She just passed out at work, and that's all I know," Alice sobbed, her body trembling with sadness. At that moment, the man who had given Fernanda a ride also approached and embraced both women. Julio, who was standing not far away, noticed the tattoo on the man's wrist. It was the same tattoo they had seen in the surveillance video. A chill ran down his spine as the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. He quietly excused himself, leaving with a racing mind after hearing the tragic news about Amanda. Alice had immediately cancelled the grand reception planned for her birthday, but the night before, she had spent a long time in her office, talking on the phone. It was Julio who explained that Amanda had actually survived and was now under protection. He also told her that they had a lead on the person who might have committed the crime. Eventually, Alice announced that the celebration would still proceed. Her niece Fernanda didn't know whom the elderly woman had spoken to or why she had changed her mind so suddenly, but the news left her delighted. After all, Aunt hinted to me some time ago that she would hand over the business to her on her birthday, Fernanda thought. The elderly woman never mentioned specific names, but there was little doubt in Fernanda's mind that once the supposed granddaughter had left, everything would naturally pass to her. Fernanda's heart raced with anticipation as she prepared for the occasion, genuinely putting effort into helping her aunt for the first time in a long while. That night, guests gathered around the large dining table. The room was filled with the clinking of glasses, close colleagues, and friends of Alice were present, and the atmosphere was one of anticipation. However, the elderly woman seemed distracted, continually checking the clock and casting impatient glances toward the front door. Fernanda, sensing the discomfort in the room, decided to take control of the situation. Aunt Alice, everyone is here. Can I start the evening with a toast? She asked, her voice full of excitement. Don't rush, Fernanda. I'm waiting for someone else, Alice replied, her eyes still on the door. Who could that be? Fernanda asked, curiosity evident in her voice. You'll see, Alice answered with a secretive smile. At that moment, the door to the room opened and a couple entered. The young woman, dressed in a beautiful silver dress, was arm in arm with a tall man in an elegant suit. Their appearance caused a stir among the principal guests. Alice rose joyfully. And now we can begin. Otavio gently squeezed his companion's hand, sensing her tension. He knew Amanda was nervous and glanced around the room, observing various expressions. Alice's happy smile, the bewilderment of the guests, and Fernanda's pale and shocked face. Then he met Amanda's eyes. She looked stunning in her dress, her long dark hair flowing down her back, her blue eyes shining with excitement and apprehension. Let the festivities begin, he said, smiling at her, and took a step forward, holding her hand. The room filled with whispers as the guests recognized the young woman as Alice's granddaughter. But among all present, it was her niece Fernanda who was especially shaken. Her face turned pale, and her hands trembled as Alice's announcement was made. She intended to transfer most of her assets to Amanda, her rightful heir. Fernanda's fury erupted like a volcano. She caused a scene at the gathering, calling Alice a foolish old woman and Amanda a manipulator. Why don't you just die? She spat at her aunt, her face twisted with anger. Outside the room, a police team awaited, led by Julio with a stern face and unwavering eyes. They already knew that the man who had attempted to kill Amanda was Fernanda's lover. The lover had betrayed Fernanda, revealing that he had acted under her orders to eliminate Amanda. As evidence, he showed the incriminating messages on his phone from Fernanda, detailing the sinister plan. 6 months after that fateful night, the time for a joyous occasion arrived in a church adorned with white flowers. A beautiful radiant bride in a white dress walked down the aisle. It was Amanda, holding the arm of her joyful grandmother, her face beaming with happiness. At the altar, her handsome groom Otavio looked at her with adoring eyes. The medical examiner, often seen as having an unpleasant profession, was finally getting married. He had found a girl who not only accepted his line of work but embraced it. She had told him that it was thanks to his profession that they had met. In the front rows were Otavio's parents, his mother wiping tears with a handkerchief moved emotionally. My God, my Otavio has finally found such a beautiful wife. And how she plays the violin, a true delight to the ears, she repeated, having met Amanda. Julio was also present at the wedding, enjoying the celebration with his wife and son. His success in handling the case had led to a promotion at work, and he was now in charge of a department, holding the rank of lieutenant colonel. That night, at his own wedding and for the first time in many years, Otavio picked up the violin again with his new wife. They played a moving melody that brought tears to the eyes of almost every guest. It was a symbol of their union, their love, and the beautiful journey that had brought them together.